Hey zusammen und willkommen zu meiner nächsten Episode. Heute wieder zu Gast Victor Black. Heute werden wir über ein kleines neues Format ausprobieren. Es wird heute um ein Q&A-Format gehen. Das heißt, ich werde Victor Fragen stellen. Victor wird mir diese Fragen beziehungsweise die Fragen oder das, was ich nicht weiß oder was ich mich vertiefen möchte, etwas detaillierter erklären und euch ebenfalls die Pathways erklären, über wie gewisse Dinge funktionieren. So Victor, I just introduced you. We're going to talk today more in a Q&A fashion. I'm going to put you the questions up. You answer it in the best way you can.
Awesome. So before I start, let me let everybody in on a secret. Anadi's just had a birthday recently, so happy birthday, buddy.
Thank you, man.
Good for you. I could believe he just told me how young he was before we started. I thought he's 23. You said, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just awesome that you've managed to get as far down the road of coaching that as you have at that age. That's fabulous. Kudos to you, man. Kudos.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just clear that not that much people over here do it in this fashion. I do it, or over there in UK or the States like you guys. There's not much people over here, and I try to do it in the best way possible.
Yeah, you're based in look, I'm going to make a fool of myself. You're based in Switzerland, is that correct? Yes,
correct.
I got the right into that stick. Okay, cool.
Not
awesome.
Sweden.
Yeah, no, I thought it was Switzerland. Yeah, well, I know you weren't speaking Swedish, yeah, so it's like that's obviously Switzerland. Yeah, sorry, I apologize. Fire away, buddy. I interrupted you with the birthday message there.
So the few questions I have, especially, is like more in the how to get more out of a natural athlete. Are some of the questions. So one of the questions is boron supplementation. How would we see it, and would you see it as a game changer in a kind of like this one study, nothing boring about boron was the one I saw, and it showed like a lot of benefits, and I asking you right now, what do you think of it as an enhancement for an athlete bodybuilder, and down the road, do you see in different other compounds like injectable carnitine or something else that would be WADA approved that we could use as natural athletes or the natural tribe? How could we see it in them, or what could we do with them?
Okay. Give me a little latitude to answer this question, and I will definitely specifically address boron and L-carnitine in the process, but just give me a little latitude, because I'd like to take us on a little journey here, yeah? Anyone that's watching me, by the way, that normally hears me talking about enhancement, I remind people that I spent the first 20 years of my life training and competing as a natural bodybuilder. And so, a lot of people identify me as an educator of enhancement practices, but I'm very much interested in all aspects of performance and outcomes, including supplementation in natural athletes and enhanced. I certainly have natural people that I coach. So I'm going to make a couple of statements here that have the potential to potentially alienate some percentage of the audience, but I think it's important to be very transparent and very honest. I grew up in a time whereby it's fair to say that the quality standards that we held the supplementation industry were very poor. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on things that did absolutely nothing. And you have to remember, in the days before what we would quote unquote call, evidence-based practice, yeah, we really relied on the marketing of supplement companies as our, one of our primary, like what they said in the magazine ad, we believed, yeah.
Yeah.
And so 20 years of exposure to that culture, I freely admit, has jaded me to a degree, yeah. I'm at the point whereby you have to make a really good case to me before I'm going to open my wallet and spend money on supplementation. I'm not saying I'm not, and we'll talk about some of the supplements that I do recommend and the ones that have merit, but I freely and honestly accept the fact that I have a degree of bias that was built over 20 years of basically us getting screwed, by the supplementation industry, yeah. Things are better today. There's a lot of very good resources. There's a lot of very good educators. People, I think, are far better informed and educated than they were just 20 years ago. I think that's fair. And of course, the way we communicate has a great deal to do with that, with the internet. It's not magazines anymore. Yeah. So let me start with basically a few statements which I understand may rattle cages, but I think that I don't say it to be controversial. I just believe it's true, right? You're probably familiar with guys like Eric Helms, who likes to represent things as hierarchical pyramids. Are you familiar with that kind of premise? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a very good way of representing things visually, because you get a sense of, where things lie in hierarchy. In other words, what magnitude of emphasis should we be placing on certain things? Okay. And Eric and his team, I think their team's the 3D Muscle Journey. That's what they call themselves. Yeah. Have produced a number of very good resources for natural people. And I certainly think enhanced people can get great value out of those. That really the story is framed around a hierarchy of behaviors and a hierarchy of things where you pay attention to this first. An example, just for people watching, would be saying, okay, so when it comes to things like caloric restriction, at the end of the day, energy in and energy out is at the base of the pyramid. It has the greatest magnitude of impact. And then we talk about, macronutrients and micronutrients on top of that. At the very top of that pyramid, most people will allocate some space to what they'll call supplementation. Okay. Now, let's start with that understanding. So in other words, it's in the least magnitude of influence space, the least. Okay. So one of the first criticisms I would have of the discussion about supplementation is I am a coach who's dealt with thousands of clients over my coaching career. You're 23, I think you said, and I'm 53. 30 years time, when you look back at how many people dealt with you, go, that's a lot of people. Yeah. So I'm honest, most people that come to me don't have the base of the pyramid in order. Most. Yeah. I mean, the overwhelming majority don't. Yeah. I think it's fair to say that today, 2021, almost everybody understands protein, fats, and carbohydrates. It's very, very rare that you meet a man who's not eating enough protein. Very rare. Okay. But almost exclusively, they have poor micronutrient intake. Very rarely does someone show me their nutritional practices and I go, I don't have anything to add here. Just do what you're doing. Most of the time I kind of like, and we're going to have to, teach you how to eat vegetables, my friend. So in my opinion, whether we're talking about intra-workout nutrition, whether we're talking about enhancement practices, and I mean by that performance enhancing drugs or whatever like that, you have to start at the base, which is good nutritional practice. In other words, the supplements go on top of good nutritional behavior. Okay. They're not first, they're the last thing that you do. So I would actually argue, based on my exposure and my experience, that most people are too focused on supplements as a whole and not enough focus on the total behavior that they have towards nutrition. Okay. In other words, they have poor dietary practice and they're trying to make up the difference with some sort of supplement. Okay. Now, I do agree. This is the irony of the thing would be, logically, a supplement has the potential to have the greatest magnitude of change on someone who's deficient. So yes, if you have someone that just doesn't eat enough magnesium through real food on their plate, giving them some magnesium can be life-changing. Simple thing like magnesium, but it shouldn't be, if you understand what I mean. In other words, if you are eating a very well-structured nutritional plan, when you put nutritional magnesium on the table, I'm not saying it doesn't do anything, but the magnitude of variation between a great practice without supplementation and adding the supplementation is very small. The difference is, one could even argue nothing, because if, for example, if you said, okay, so the daily recommended intake, and we're going to talk about daily recommended intake, is 400 milligrams of magnesium, all right, and you're consuming 400 milligrams of magnesium through food intake, right? It's difficult to argue that putting more on the table does a whole lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can strategically place it. For example, I like to supplement with magnesium at nighttime, and it's difficult to get, a nutritional model that allows you to have nutritional timing practices in place through food. That I agree with. Okay. But I'm telling you things like, and again, we're going to get to boron. I apologize for walking away, but we're going to come back. Vitamin C, right? Supplementation is someone that's getting enough vitamin C really doesn't do anything. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
So an example would be, I don't know if it makes sense. I'm just free thinking here. Let's say we had a guy who had normal, healthy levels of testosterone. He's in the upper ranges of, say, 800 to 900 nanograms per deciliter. I don't give a rat's ass what supplementation protocol you're talking about. You're never going to cross the physiological range. Okay? So someone that has dog shit testosterone, right? I mean, horrible, right?
Yeah.
Is it plausible through fixing his diet, introducing resistance training, certain supplements, you can take him from horrible to good? Yes, but you shouldn't be horrible in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? So this discussion about elite athletes, I'm going, well, most supplements probably have a greater magnitude of impact on Citizen Joe than they do on elite athletes. The whole class of testosterone boosters is an example. Most natural elite athletes are elite level hormonal profile individuals anyway. I made a seminar the other day that you participated in. It was about safer enhancement practices for women. And one of the things I raised was this concept of the massive overrepresentation of women who suffer from PCOS as elite athletes. It's ridiculous, the number of women who are elite athletes. And one of the reasons is there's many different forms of PCOS, but one of the forms hyper-produces androgen levels far beyond natural range. And this gives women a competitive advantage over, otherwise plausibly natural women. Okay. They're not taking testosterone. Their body's producing too much because they have a disease state. Okay. So in other words, I would argue that if you're an elite natural, okay, you're probably just by default in the upper levels of normal testosterone values anyway. So what the hell is it? Whatever strategy you put on the table to supposedly boost testosterone is probably going to be of marginal influence because you're never crossing that barrier. You're never going to be 2,000 nanograms per deciliter. I don't care what you take. The only way you're crossing that barrier is through pharmacology. You see what I'm saying? So
Definitely.
I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the hype that you see around supplementation, because if you come to me and say, listen, I'm a natural, and I say, right, I'm going to treat you like a natural bodybuilder. We're going to train like this. We're going to eat like this. We're going to sleep like this. We're going to manage stress like this. We're going to eat all the things in place. To be successful at that point, you're probably like running in the top few percentile of men without any supplements at all. Whereas Citizen Joe, who has a dog shit diet, right? I can put supplements on the table, some simple ones that may change his life. Does that kind of all connect there? Yeah. So why is this story the story? And this is where I might rub noses out of joint. You have to remember that at the end of the day, many information providers, and I include myself, right? This is a business, okay? And when you don't use drugs, right, there's a relatively limited amount of things to talk about. We talk about training, we talk about food, we talk about supplements, we talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about stress. Now, that sounds like a lot of things to do, but I'm telling you, when you start talking about things for 5 years, eventually you run out of shit to say. And so you start having conversations with people that are less and less meaningful, more and more minutia, just to have something to fucking say. Right? Now, if we're really honest, our entire business is based around that. It has been since the magazine days. Picture this: before the internet, every month the magazines came out, and in the magazines they had photographs of the bodybuilders and they had stories. Right? Now, if you picked up the magazine and the stories were the same every month, month after month after month, you eventually get to the point that you don't feel like you're getting value and you're going to stop spending your money on that resource, right? The magazines are commercially obliged to keep coming up with shit to say. Now, translate this into the world of the internet. I'm honest with you, people that sell books and people that do this and people that want your attention have to keep coming up with shit to say. All right. So let's go back to the pyramid that I talked about, Eric Helms, right? Where do supplements live? Right at the top of the pyramid. In fact, some of the pyramids are so audacious that they actually allocate a percentage of impact to outcome. Have you ever seen those pyramids? Okay. So some of them will say, supplements represent 5% of the value or whatever like that. You see the graphic I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay. Let's just be generous and say 10%. I don't even think it's 10%. Let's be generous and say it's 10%. What that means though is all of the supplementational practices that you might undertake, all swept together into the middle of the room, represent a 10% magnitude of difference in you. Not an individual supplement, I mean all of them. So if you're taking 10 supplements, then, again, it doesn't work this way, but I'm sure I'm just trying to keep it simple for the explanation. So each one's 1%. You take this, you don't take this, it's 1%. I would argue most people will see a far greater magnitude of return by focusing on other things, right? The big rocks, the ones with the massive return, most people don't do. And for some reason, and I think it's just good marketing on the behalf of supplement companies, people are obsessed about the gravel, the little rocks, right? That this supplement is going to do that or that, and I just don't agree. So let me explain how I think most people should eat. And if you follow this model, then you go, holy crap, like I get what you're saying. I believe that if you're a male bodybuilder in your natural body, you should probably intake somewhere between 4 and 6 meals a day. Okay. There's a degree of, personal variation in that number. Some people like a little bit bigger meals. Some people like a little bit smaller meals spread out during the day. The bigger you are, typically the more you eat, et cetera, et cetera. I typically eat 5-6 meals a day. Most guys, 4 to 6 meals a day. You don't need to eat 8 times a day. And I completely disagree with anyone that's saying you should eat once a day. Okay. So 4 to 6 meals a day. I actually believe that you should try to have, if you're going to have 5 different meals a day, 5 different protein sources, spread out the amino profile. Okay. So in my case, that would be foods I like to eat: eggs, chicken, fish, beef, whey. Okay. Not chicken. Not whey protein shakes 3 times a day. Spread it out. Some beef, some chicken, some fish, some whey. Okay. I also think there's a merit to the argument that says, ideally, we want to have a number of different carbohydrate profiles, some rice, some oatmeal, some potato, blah, blah, blah. Yep. You don't want to be rice, right? Okay. Even though lots of guys do it, I don't agree. Okay. And then the final thing is you should be putting a diet that is abundant in fruits and vegetables on the table. Okay. Now, what does abundant mean? It doesn't mean that you need to be a freaking vegan, right? It means that you need to understand that your protein, fats, and carbs fundamentally come from the items I've already discussed. And for a large extent, the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients and all the things that are quote unquote good for us that help us to manage oxidation, they really come from fruits and vegetables. I don't think anyone needs me to tell them that. They kind of know that, right?
Yeah.
And so I would argue that so if you had eggs and oatmeal for breakfast, do I think that's a good macronutrient profile? Yeah, it's what I eat every day, and I have done for 20 years. Eggs and oatmeal is a staple of our world, okay? But I would try to convince you to place a little dark berries, maybe a little pineapple, maybe a little yogurt on the oatmeal, because I want those micronutrients and the benefits of the yogurt in our diet as well. Yeah. I would try to convince you to throw a little mushrooms and a little spinach or tomatoes or something into the omelet, not just eggs and oatmeal. Yeah. And then at lunchtime, when you have a chicken sandwich, I'm going to do my best to convince you not to have a chicken breast and 2 pieces of bread. I'd like you to stick some vegetables in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you sit down at night, I don't want you to have a piece of fish and some rice. I would like you to have, let's say some cruciferous vegetables, something from the broccoli, cauliflower, that Brussels sprouts, this family. In other words, in the same way that we spread our protein and our carbohydrates across the day, yeah, we want to have a variety of different fruits and vegetables. Now, I'm not one of these guys that say there's magical super vegetables and superfoods. I'm just saying, I think if you're logical about it, say, look, we should all try and have some leafy greens. You know, we all should have some dark berries. We should try to get something from the onion, leek, garlic family. These are fabulous for us. We should try to get some cruciferous vegetables. We should try to get maybe some fungus, some mushrooms and things like that. So in other words, it's just common sense. Now,
a variation in everything.
Just a variation in everything. There's nothing crazy. There's nothing kooky about this diet. It's just a common sense diet.
Get a little bit to compromise everything a little bit. We just went to the point where we know that the biggest part of the natural athlete is based in the nutrition. We don't think that the last few % you get from the supplements would make that difference, but rather you would choose to make a difference in your diet, change some carbs, change your protein source over the day, add some vegetables, and these would make a bigger difference than these last few percentile in the supplementation.
Sure. So I'm not saying that last few percentile don't count. What I'm saying is most people have horrible diets and they're trying to fix it with supplementation. I'm saying be logical. This gets laid on top of a fabulous diet. Okay. Now, if you have a fabulous diet, I would argue that from a nutritionist perspective, that's going to serve you very well. There are certainly some things that you could make a really strong argument that we should have, like some vitamin D. I think we should get at least 5,000 units of vitamin D in a day. You could make an argument about an omega-3 oil, a krill oil, or a fish oil. I think it's a very easy argument to make. You can make an argument about vitamin K. These are fundamental things that every human being on the planet should be behaving this way. I mean, everybody right now. If you take that individual versus the guy that has a horrible diet and start putting tablets and pills and potions on the table, different outcomes happen. If you take someone that has a fabulous diet and start putting things on, I'm not saying they don't do anything, but mostly these supplements are proven in studies on people that have deficiencies. So when you read the study and you go, such and such did this, I go, yeah, but the guy was deficient in the thing. That's why it had such a profound impact. So a zinc is a great example. You take a moderate amount of zinc and give it to a guy who's zinc deficient, you change his world. My question is, why the fuck are you zinc deficient? You're an athlete. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it makes no sense. So out comes the study, blah, blah, blah. And I go, read the study. It's in zinc deficient individuals, moron. You're in. So if you're zinc deficient, do I think that you should take a zinc supplement? You bet your ass I do. I even think you should take a zinc supplement. But what I'm arguing is if you have a great diet, the magnitude of difference by introducing supplementation is a few percentage points of variation. Okay. Now, the entire supplement industry hate me now, right? A lot of people that like to put supplements in their thing hate me, but I would argue that a fabulous diet with a handful of staples that serve everyone in the world basically the same are a great example. And if someone said to me, what's the three most important supplements outside of that, I would say you need to explain to me who the individual is and their needs. So if that person is experiencing gastric, distress, then it's this. If that person is having trouble sleeping, then it's this. If that person is having stress management problems, then it's this. In other words, then you start to supplement on need. Okay. So I guess all I would say here is I think that supplements are massively over-marketed to our community. I'm not saying they don't have benefit, but if you really read all the studies, the very, very, very profound benefits they demonstrate time and time and time again to have are premised on individuals who have almost a disease state through nutritional, deficit. It's not, you're not talking about people that are young, healthy, fit men, and you give them X amount of this and it changes their life. That's very different. That's marketing. That's marketing. And then you have a whole raft of supplements like L-glutamine, where its application is conditional. Under certain circumstances, yes. Under certain circumstances, waste of money. Okay.
So I use myself in glutamine people with GI distress and GI function problems. So that's the only point I would use glutamine, but that's the only. Yeah.
It's fair to say that a great many people today experience that. But in other words, I just don't start saying, well, this is great and this is not. I just go, I don't necessarily agree. What I think is a far more interesting conversation would be, okay, so is there anything out there that we can't really get from food? You know what I'm saying?
It's basically everything in the food. So
yeah, I would argue there are some things out there. So for example, creatine is a good example, right? Can you get creatine through diet? Yes, but you have to consume a ridiculous amount of creatine-rich foods to reach the threshold of maximum return. Okay,
I think it's somewhere like 2 pounds of red meat.
Yeah, about 2 pounds of red meat. Who the hell eats 2 pounds of red meat a day? So in other words, if you acknowledge that creatine is one of the most studied supplements in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And people find it boring. I just think, you know what? Everybody owes it to themselves to put some creatine in their model. And if they don't like it, take it out by all means. But it's a no-brainer to try. Okay, why? Because you can't get that creatine from food. You know? Yeah. This is why it becomes a no-brainer. Yeah. So selenium, eat a fucking Brazil nut. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, so why do you need to supplement? You can get most things you need from food choices. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say to people is, first, fill up your tank, get as far as you can get with food, right? Mm-hmm. Then there are some things like today, I don't think that people get enough sunlight exposure. So vitamin D makes sense. It's fair to say that through farming practices, the omega-3 content in many foods is not what it once was. So an omega-3 supplement makes sense. Do you know? And you go down the list, creatine is, you know, it's very easy to make an argument to at least trying creatine. And I said, by the way, anyone that tries these things, go, I tried it, I didn't like it. That's not what I'm arguing against. Then you tried it, you didn't like it, move on. Do you know? I'm not saying you have to take it. I'm saying it makes sense to consider it. Yeah.
So that's the individual. So basically, we have to see everything in the individual point. So we don't prescribe supplements based on all of these supplements are good. Yeah, but some are specific. So some you can put in some specific places.
Agreed. And then you would have a conversation that said, okay, so there are certain things out there that have enough supportive evidence that I'm prepared to spend a little money on. And when I try them, I go, yeah, I'm happy to spend my money there. They would be things like citrulline malate. Again, you can get citrulline malate through your diet, but it's very difficult to get to the recommended optimal dosing level. It's, I would say, impossible. You know, so, you know, and I use a citrulline malate supplement. You know, I would say beta alanine is another one of those things. Do you know? But a lot of these things like boron and stuff like that, if you actually, you know, have a really healthy diet, it's extremely unlikely that you have a deficiency. You know? Right, yeah. And again, like, I apologize, I'm kind of going around circling around the drain here, but you know, most of the studies in boron that show these amazing things are in boron deficient men. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. Do you know? Yeah. So then you kind of look at, they go, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying is, if you mean that those types of supplements on top of everything I've spoken about first, so we have the base diet, we have the vitamin D, the fish oil, okay, and then we have the creatine and the beta alanine and the citrulline malate, right? If you're saying, okay, so some things on top of that may be valuable, I don't have a problem in the world with that. All I'm cautioning on is just know what kind of return you're getting here. It's like the difference between pulling up the gas station and filling it up with high octane fuel. That doesn't make you a Camry or Ferrari. You know what I mean? It might, you might be able to tell the difference. Might. But people have this expectation if they pull up in the family sedan and they drive off in a Ferrari.
It's funny because I don't use any specific kinds of supplements like these in my clients, just because I know that their basic structure, like I read both books from Eric Helms, so the training pyramid and the nutritional pyramid, and so I always think, like, before we have to add anything, we have to have everything else in place. So nutrition, the stress management, fatigue management, so are some of the things that have to be in place before we have to take some specific supplements. The boron question was
just on that subject, I cannot remember because it was so long ago since it's a very good book, but it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember if Eric attributes a percentage like in the upper tier? I think he said 3% or something, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it's 3 to 5%, but
yeah.
I'm not sure definitely.
Yeah. I think it was about that. So you understand again, the point is, but that's everything. That's all of the supplements together. You might get another 3 to 5% of it. And that's okay as long as you see it through those lenses.
But we have to remember it's also creatine that is one of the best studied and probably one of the supplements that gives you the biggest benefit.
Sure.
That you would feel actually. So we have to see it. Probably everything else, and we add a creatine, which gives you probably 1.5% from all of the supplements you would take, because it has some validity. It showed in the studies what it did in the human being, and so it's not that we have to look at it, but I rather try to enhance the natural athletes to the best point possible. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's he's in the natural bodybuilding. I don't know in which federation he's a pro, but he's in one of the natural bodybuilding federations a pro, and he's looking to get his pro card in the IFBB Pro League naturally. And so I had this discussion, so which supplements I would recommend to him, and I said, I don't know. I looked some supplements up, but I even this ectosterone stuff, it's really not that I would say it's something of big validity.
If he has the genetic talent to compete that, I would not be surprised if you're talking about an individual that has naturally very high testosterone levels. I know a lot of elite natural bodybuilders, and seriously, these guys are not walking around at 300 nanograms per deciliter. I'm not saying they're cheating. I'm saying their natural production is extraordinarily good.
Yes.
Right? Very good. In the same capacity that elite female athletes are very often overrepresented by women who are hyperandrogenic. They naturally produce androgen levels that are at the upper levels. These are not women with low androgen levels, nor men with low androgen levels. So those types of tools, as you said, that may be life-changing to Citizen Joe, less so to elite athletes, less so.
Perfect.
So all right, so let me just say a couple of other things about supplementation. So there are some things that I would say, yes, certainly should try. But the interesting thing is that I actually believe supplementations have more to offer enhanced athletes than naturals. Okay. Now, the reason behind that is when you start consuming drugs, okay, it's fair and reasonable to say, well, does anything change here? And, the demand on things like magnesium and the demand for things like boron, the demand for these things it's very plausible to say it exceeds the needs of the natural.
Yeah, I get you. Okay.
So I would actually argue, because I'd be coming from everything from the point of view, hang on a sec, we're talking in naturals here, right? Okay. Now, my argument would be so if you mean that we're going to be addressing enhanced trainers, okay, then what I would say, an example would be the daily recommended intake for magnesium, just out of, just by the way, right, is 400 milligrams of magnesium a day, okay? I actually recommend enhanced trainers set that target significantly higher at 800 milligrams a day. And so you can see where I'm going with this thing. Now, I think supplements actually have a far greater magnitude of change in enhanced trainers because why? It's very difficult to get to my levels naturally. So as I start cranking the numbers up because you're enhanced, right, it becomes more and more and more impractical to get there through food.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get you.
So my argument would be, if you're a natural woman, here's the benchmark. If you're an enhanced woman, it's this. If you're a natural man, here's the benchmark. If you're enhanced, it's this. And very, very often, we're going to struggle to get to the higher benchmark for enhanced athletes just through food. It's just really, really hard to get to those levels. Okay. How do you get enough chromium? So, as we go through those things, the need for boron increases, the need for copper increases, the need for zinc increases, the need for magnesium increases, the need for selenium increases. Chromium, you need like 1 microgram per gram of carbohydrate intake. So you can see where I'm going with this conversation. If you're smashing 700 grams of carbohydrates a day, okay, as a larger enhanced trainer, how the hell are you going to get that amount of chromium out of food? Even though your food intake is there, it's probably unlikely you're going to be getting there. And so supplementation becomes more and more important for enhanced trainers than naturals, more important. As your mass increases, and as the demand for these, what we call cofactors in the biological production, plausibly gets larger. Magnesium is a good example because magnesium is used in the process whereby glycogen is forced into the muscle cells. A lot of type 2 diabetics, when you look at their diet, they're magnesium deficient. You put some magnesium in their diet and suddenly their insulin resistance starts to improve. Why? Because magnesium is a mineral that is used in the metabolic process, and if you're deficient, then it impedes or creates a bottleneck. Okay, so you have a type 2 diabetic. Lots and lots of type 2 diabetics don't have enough magnesium. That makes everything worse. You take that person, you give them magnesium. Wow, that's heaps better. Okay, but take someone who's healthy and has a good diet, put the magnesium, not much happens, but then give that magnesium to an enhanced builder. He can use more magnesium. He consumes more magnesium through the process. And so my argument is completely different to most people that said, I would argue that supplementation, over-the-counter supplementation, is probably more important for enhanced trainers than naturals, because naturals should be able to get 90% of their needs through foods. And because of the massively increased need of just, God, I'm not particularly large, but I'm 260 pounds. Anyone that's over 200 pounds is a natural bodybuilder, I'm a little suspicious of. Do you know? It's, you know, like the whole, you know, natty or not sort of thing. You know, you just have to look at very, very few. They do exist. I don't have a problem with what they do. But most natural bodybuilders are under 200 pounds. Okay. So, you know, anyone that's 250 pounds, and I don't mean obese, you know, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's, you maybe, you know, like there's certainly individuals out there that I don't have a problem, but I'm talking in general terms. Okay. So as our muscle mass increases, then so does the demand. And that even applies to things like DHEA. So, you know, I'm a big fan of supplementing with DHEA because when you're a larger man with more muscle, you need more DHEA for the production of, you know, the synthesis of androgens that actually occurs inside the skeletal muscle tissue itself. You need higher levels of systemic DHEA, and you actually need high levels intramuscular DHEA, which doesn't show up. There's no correlation between intramuscular DHEA and DHEA. So in other words, if you go and get your blood work done and look at your blood work, that's meaningless, right? Because it doesn't correlate to intramuscular DHEA and systemic blood DHEA are not the same thing. Yeah. When they measure them, there's often a disparity between the two. So it would be nice if we could just measure DHEA or DHEAS and say, okay, so we're getting enough. But I would argue, no, as an enhanced trainer, you probably want to put a little extra on the table because you're raising everything up. So the idea of raising boron up, the idea of raising selenium up, the idea of raising magnesium and chromium, it's a pretty easy argument to follow. You know? And so, you know, this is where a lot of people kind of go, oh, holy crap, I thought it was, you know, this was the domain of the natural. And I would argue, no, it's actually more beneficial to enhanced trainers than natural trainers.
Yeah, interesting. So basically, to just quickly round up everything, so we would see specific supplementation in naturals in specific cases, especially for Citizen Joe, but not for an elite athlete that has everything in check. Yes, there will be a small percentage, but that would exactly what you said. You won't drive off a gas station with a sedan instead of a Ferrari. So yeah, these differences we have to keep in mind. Rather, we would be using them as an enhanced athlete. So increasing the need of everything would bring us better.
If you take nothing more away from this conversation, understand this. The application of most performance enhancing tools accelerates muscle protein synthesis.
Yes.
Okay. And if we can accelerate muscle protein synthesis, it makes logical, rational sense that all of the precursors, any precursor
processes before,
that are involved in that process or any cascading event that follows, right? The demand plausibly would be greater. Yeah. This is it doesn't take much of a mind to go, yeah, I could see that, right? So the sort of saying is like that this is my viewpoint, this is my filter, this is the way I see things, sort of thing. So look, quick summary. Most of the marketing around supplementation is not from the people who are conducting evidence-based trials, but unscrupulous supplement companies that are going into that literature and trying to find things that they can cherry pick, to help them market their products. And overwhelmingly in natural, the natural marketplace, okay, they are picking studies where we're talking about, effectively individuals who are deficient in a particular vitamin, mineral, or some cofactor, and holding that study up saying, look at the incredible change that happened when we introduced supplementation. And I don't have a problem with that. You just need to understand that these were deficient individuals, right? And by bringing their levels into normal range, right, this can have profound changes in outcome. Yeah. That's different than taking someone that has optimal levels of these things anyway and putting another 10% on the table and saying, well, what is the magnitude of difference between adding the 10%? Very often it's minimal.
All right. Yeah. I would just try to get another question, even if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So let's
sorry to make that such a long conversation, but I think
it's great. But we went from how you would use it, why you would use it. We discussed basically every point. So you didn't just say, hey, yes or no. It's more the understanding that interests me and the listeners. So basically, everybody can say anything without the rational, but we put it in a very rational space. Why, how, and when.
And let me just layer one thing on top of that. I did a podcast the other day with a few gentlemen, and I made a statement maybe I can repeat here because it's a really important thing for people to understand, and that is, so if you're looking at studies and you're trying to apply those studies to our tribe and our domain and our practices, you have to understand that any individual study can be refuted like I am doing here. Okay, I'm saying, yeah, but hang on a sec, that's in deficient individuals. I'm refuting the study. Okay. I tend to see things through the filter that says you shouldn't look for a study, but you should look at the totality of evidence that exists to support a statement based on all that we know about a subject from the clinical literature. Then we take that and we apply it through anecdote and observation in the real world, through experience, to people who have been doing this for many, many years. And the final part of the trilogy is personal preference. So if I have an individual who comes to me who passionately believes that supplementing 10 milligrams of boron a day is going to make the difference between them being an amateur competitor and winning the gold medal, I don't have a problem. It's 10 milligrams of boron. Like, unless we're talking about a product that I have concerns over the safety of that individual by taking that product. And there are a few out there, but there are not really many supplements that are life-threatening at the dosages that are the package. There are some things that go, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. But let's take boron. So if someone said to me, look, I disagree, Victor, I'm taking 10 milligrams of boron and screw you, that's fine. I don't really care. I'm just trying to explain to people the methodology and the thought process behind the way I approach the world. Personal choice matters. So if you listen to me and you go, look, it's very difficult to argue that these studies are done in deficient individuals, I will concede that fact, right? And yeah, you've been out there doing this for 35 years, Victor, and I've been doing it for 2, so I will concede the fact that you are the voice of experience here. But I disagree. I don't know why I disagree, but I do disagree, and I'm going to take my 10 milligrams of boron. Then I don't have a problem in the world with that. Just take the boron, dude. It's not going to offend me. It's not going to upset me. And if you feel that it provides a benefit, you know what? Never underestimate the value of placebo. Dude, if you believe in it, then you should do it.
Great. Thank you for the roundup. So let's just go over a few questions if we got time, or
Sure.
just more in the right now. For next time, I would like to talk in the training space. Let's keep it today in the nutrition space. I would like to talk a little bit about nutrition absorption, and I know it's in the hierarchy also a little bit up, and also about in the nutrient partitioning. So let's start with nutrient absorption. You always hear these people like talking, hey, 30 grams of proteins and this amount of carbs per meal. How would we optimize this, especially natural versus enhanced? Do you see there a big difference? I know probably if you're talking about insulin, we could use a little bit different amounts of carbs, but rather the big picture. How would we see it? You just beforehand you said 4 to 6 meals per day, and how you would, which protein sources, different carb sources, different vegetables and fruits you would put in there. Do you have some guidelines you follow, or do you see it also as a very individual place? Yes, definitely the grams per kilogram will always be individual. Also the blood glucose is probably a big point you would see. But do you have anything other than that you would try to apply?
Yeah. I think there's a framework that you begin the conversation with, and then you apply the framework, and then you have an open enough mind to modify it for personal feedback and choice. So let me explain what the framework is first. Yeah. Let's say we were going to do 5 meals a day, and let's say you were 200-pound natural bodybuilder. Okay. I would argue that you should be starting at a gram of protein per lean pound of body weight, 200 grams, 200-pound bodybuilder, 200 grams of protein, nice and clean. Okay. Let's say that we are going to have 4 meals a day. Okay. Okay. So what I would then do is I would take my total protein, my total fat, my total carbohydrate, and my total micronutrient intake and divide them into nice, neat little bundles of 4 equal proportions and spread them out at relatively even intervals throughout the day. The purpose behind that is most people would be familiar with the concept of the amino acid leucine as a trigger for a muscle protein synthesis event. But if you ingest just the amino acid leucine or one of the other branch chain amino acids, you could trigger a muscle protein synthesis event that will basically cough and splutter and die. You need to have all of the other cofactors on hand at that moment in time to not just trigger the event, but sustain it optimally. Okay. So you want to have things bundled up nice and evenly and spread them out during the day. The analogy I like to use is it's almost like walking around with a drip, like the nutrients are just dripping into your system at relatively even rate over the course of the day. Right? I don't believe in biasing towards one part of the day to start. Now, that doesn't mean we might not end up there because of personal preference or because of the way an individual responds. You have to be open to that. But I would say most guys, most of the time, are going to be served by relatively even parcels of meals spread out relatively even over the course of the day. Same amount of protein, same amount of fat, same amount of carbs, spread out in nice little parcels. Right? Can you bias? Yes, I would argue that you should probably do that with protein anyway. Okay. But could you bias fat to different parts of the day? Could you bias carbohydrates around the training window? Yes, of course. But this is what I would call a more advanced strategy rather than a framework that you begin with. So that's where you would start a beginner. Now, let's say we're going into a growth phase. I would argue that we would keep our protein the same and our fat the same, but very, very slowly we would incrementally increase carbohydrate intake, could use carbohydrate subjects as the primary driver of growth. Okay. The anabolic agent that basically aids that. Now, so one of the models to do that is as we titrate the carbohydrate intake, we can titrate that relatively even over the course of the day. And at some point, you're going to get to the point where you say to me, look, Victor, if you make me eat another grain of rice, I'm going to puke, right? When you get to that point, the idea of using things like liquid calories, liquid carbohydrates, and strategically then placing them around the training window, I fully support, right? But in other words, that's not where we start. That's out there, you know? Okay. So in other words, a lot of people, again, they do the same thing with supplements. They have shitty models that they follow, and they think that some carbohydrate powder strategically placed around the training window is going to change things. And I'm telling you, it's not. But I'm sympathetic and empathetic because I felt that I used to believe that stuff myself. 25 years ago, if I didn't take my protein shake to the gym so I could have my protein shake following training, I used to get really upset with myself because I thought, oh, the fucking anabolic window, I've missed out. The reality is that there is an anabolic window, absolutely, okay? And it lasts about 48 hours following a training event, right? And there is a process of things like fuel loading efficiency that you need to take in glycogen before a training event. And, you know, it's about 48 hours before a training window. So in other words, what you do 48 hours leading into and 48 hours leading away from a training event is profoundly important. And at some point, when you have optimized that to the greatest degree possible, am I open to the point of saying, okay, so now let's start to zoom in and look at the training window and talk about, you know, other things that we could do around the training window as an advanced methodology? Absolutely. I have no problem at all with that, but don't start there. Don't do that when your diet sucks. You know what I mean? Get the framework in place first and start stepping forward, and then you can start to talk about biasing and nutrient timing windows and things like that. And people talk about all these things, and as I said, it's the same thing of, and I keep talking about enhancement, but like people come to me and they're interested in enhancement, they don't even own a blood pressure monitor. How could you not own a blood pressure monitor? I don't own a set of food scales. I don't keep a training journal. Show me your nutrition journal. Oh, I don't keep a nutrition journal. They're all over in peri-workout nutrition, and they're all over this and all over that, and they don't have a training journal. They don't have a nutrition journal. They don't have this. They don't have that. They don't have a blood. You know, they don't have the fundamentals of success in place first, and they're, you know, and there's only one word for it. They have the cart before the horse. Right now, again, the same thing is true. If you had to allocate a percentage of or a weighting to success, right? I will give up my, I'm not saying they're not important, but I will give up my peri-workout nutrition in a flash before I give up my 4 or 5 meals a day. You know, if I had to sacrifice something, if I had no choice, make up some stupid reason why you had to give it up, I would give it up in a flash. I would keep my eggs and oatmeal and my chicken sandwich and my, you know, steak and potatoes and my salmon and rice, right? And my vegetables, because the glycogen that you consume when you go into the gym to train was placed there in the 48 hours leading up to the event, not in the 30 minutes on the way to the gym. You know, but I am empathetic because I did all these stupid things myself. I remember driving to the gym eating fucking bananas because I'm thinking that the banana I'm eating is going to fuel my workout. The reality is the glycogen in that banana is still in your belly being digested by the time you're at the gym. You know, it's the oatmeal you ate yesterday that's producing the glycogen that's giving you the training session. Do you know?
Yeah.
So again, like, it's just, when you step back and you think about it logically and rationally, what you do nutritionally in the 48 hours leading up to a training event and the 48 hours leading away from training, these things are profoundly important. So if you said to me, how important is nutrient timing? In that context, it's absolutely, like, fundamentally, like, you got to get that shit right. But if you mean, no, I mean like the 30 minutes before I train, I'm telling you, like, I'm not saying it doesn't do anything, but it's nowhere near the magnitude of having a really good framework in place first. And the reason I keep banging on about this is just, I'm telling you guys don't have the framework in place. You know what I mean?
No, it's like we could also do this pyramid again and say, hey, nutrient timing is also up here. Eat the first place, 48 hours after and 48 hours before your workout correctly, and 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after will be like this upper small percentage. It will have its place when you're like this pretty elite athlete, which always has everything in check. But at this point, before, not.
So the comment I made before about supplementation being more important for enhanced trainers, I'm going to say the same thing about nutrient timing is more important for enhanced trainers than naturals. Why? As a natural trainer, this is what you need to do. About an hour and a half before you go to the gym, you need to have your pre-training meal that should ideally consist of some protein and some carbohydrates, ideally not the heaviest meal of the day. Yep. That protein and those carbohydrates, by the time you get to the gym, if you consume them an hour and a half before, will have been, for the most part, partially digested. And so you will have some glucose in blood serum. Okay. And then you train for an hour. And then when you finish, you need to eat again. That's it. Right. Now, if you're using insulin, right, then we can have a conversation about the strategic application of, different carbohydrates and why. But for most natural trainers, the meal you have 1.5 hours before you train, and then you train for an hour, that's 2.5 hours, right? It's time to eat again. That's it. You can't convince me that 99% of people can't wait. So if I had a meal 1.5 hours before the training window, and then I train for an hour, you can't convince me that you can't wait 2.5 hours before the next food intake. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be catabolic. Like, it's overthinking shit. Now, as I said, I completely agree. The strategic application of a rapid acting insulin as a fuel supply strategy, does that potentially benefit from the application of, certain types of carbohydrate sources? This is a valid discussion, but that's for a very, very advanced elite professional trainers.
Yeah, great. Perfect. So yeah, that would it be. So for the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit in the training differences in natural versus enhanced, what we would do with the volume, frequency, deload, fatigue management strategies. But for today, the nutrition episode, I think we covered a lot, also a lot in the supplementation space. Thank you a lot, Victor, for having
Can I just make a closing statement? Because I want to make sure that I'm not putting the wrong message out here. I guess my message would be for this. For most guys that are recreational trainers, and that's really who I'm addressing here. I think that a lot of guys are focused on the wrong thing. So they're looking for very obscure, relevant and technically interesting conversations, right? But I fully support after you are flawlessly executing the fundamentals. So if you came to me and I said to you, right, listen, you said, I'm interested in coaching. And I said to you, great, can you share with me your nutritional journal? And you said, sure, let me share that with you now because I'm all organized and here it is, right? And I look down at it and I go, man, you got your shit together. I'm more than happy to have that conversation about what we might do, right, at a micro level to optimize these outcomes. I have no problem with that. Fully support that. I'm just being really honest. Most guys are not that structured, are not that organized, they're not that disciplined. And they're not. I'm telling you, thousands of clients, and I can count on one hand the number of people that I've looked at and I've gone, you know what, you really got your shit together, buddy. Do you know what I mean? Most of them don't keep training journals. Most of them don't keep nutritional journals. Most of them don't keep photo records. Most of them don't keep very good blood work. I mean, when I say, can I see your blood work? I expect you to pull out a folder that has your blood work going back 5 years. So I can see it nicely plotted out on a graph, any variations in markers. I don't mean that you have the capacity to go rummaging around in the filing cabinet and find that PDF, that printout that you had 4 years ago. I mean, like, you're so organized, you have it laid out in an Excel spreadsheet so I can see variation of markers of things like DHEAS levels over 5 years, every single time you get, that's what I'm talking about. When you get to the point where you go, man, you got your shit together, is there a discussion to be had about the micromanagement of these strategic inputs with benefit? I have no problem with that. This is the world that I live in. I have all of my big rocks in place. The only thing left for me are those conversations, and I find them interesting and valid, but it's no point in having that conversation with someone if they're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. You understand what I'm saying? You're coming at it from the wrong perspective. So my closing statement for anyone, please don't take what I'm saying as the wrong way, which is dismissive of the value. It just needs to be placed into the context of saying there are more important things than, and when you have those things in place, then it makes logical, rational sense to move on to what I call the gravel, the little things that you turn over that you might see a sub-fractional return from, but that's all that's left. That's the world that I live in. Every single thing that I might or might not do might give me sub-fractional return. But there are things that that guy over there is doing that he could be 10% better overnight. Do you mean? Get that done first and then come and join me in this world, which is the world of the sub-fractional percentage return for this action or that action.
I think at your point, it's more like the continuously repeating everything you're doing for a long period of time. So before we have everything in, after we have everything in check, it's just continuously progressing. It's nothing less. The sport is not complicated, but at first, I think in this conversation, what you have to get out of it, have your basics in check, have the lower steps in the hierarchy of the pyramid in check, and then let's discuss the point of specific supplementation, specific nutrient timing, specific meals or meal timing, and even in the enhanced place, it's like more validity. But even there, I see a lot of people taking the performance enhancing drugs as an excuse. Hey, I'm right now on Trembolone. I don't have to look at my diet. It's a no-brainer. My uptake is way better with Tren. So no, definitely not. You have still to get everything in check to get the most out of it.
Yep,
and
I agree.
That's probably the biggest point a lot of people miss. Basics in check will always be the biggest part in this sport. Before you don't get this, don't even try to get up there with the small percentage.
Well said. Well said.
So yeah, that will be it. Thank you for having me on again. We will